Thank you so much for talking to us, joining us again. First off, in these presidential debates, we hear the back and forth of employment statistics. I know you have a feeling about stats in general. I think you, like us here on TIR, see them as a deceitful tactic to fool the public. In your latest piece, you talk about the sacrosanct nature of U.S. government statistics. Can you tell the audience about the U.S. jobs report? Also, has President Biden done realistically? What has he done realistically in the realm of job creation?
Okay, well, when you talk about jobs, the government puts out two reports uh, at the same time, two surveys. One survey is called the Current Establishment Survey, and not really a survey; it's kind of like a partial population census. It's the large companies, about 400,000 or so of them send in information every month to the Commerce Department, Labor Department. Okay, that's the one survey. But the point there is large businesses predominantly. And there's some indication that the participation even of large businesses has declined significantly in recent years. But let's say 400,000 or so. Then there's a separate survey, which is a true survey. The Labor Department conducts every month. It actually calls employers and it calls people. Uh, Now that picks up more of the small businesses, small companies.
Mhm.
Uh, so they're really looking at two different populations, and what comes out of those two different surveys on jobs is a sometimes a totally different picture. The point that I want to make at the get go here is that these are statistics. What's a statistic? It's a manipulation of the actual raw data and the numbers. You know, they perform certain methodologies on the raw data, and they have a whole bunch of assumptions, and then they come out with a statistic. You know, most people think it's an actual number of truth and fact. It's not. That's not what a statistic is. Having said that, back to these two surveys.
Mhm.
One large business, one predominantly smaller businesses and households, right? The second one's called the Current Population Survey, or sometimes called the Household Survey. Well, if you look at the differences in terms of jobs created last year, in the first survey, you get this 353,000 jobs last month, right?
Mhm.
Created new jobs. And over the year, 3.1 million claimed by Biden, the year meaning 2023. So hold those figures: 3.1 million, 353,000 latest month, January. Well, if you look at the other survey, the population survey, it's a different picture. If you look at the total level of employment from the end of last year to the end of actually the end of 2022 to the end of 2023, and then you add January. If you look at that total employment, in other words, the jobs that are created, in the economy, total employment, you see a much different picture. You see only 820,000 jobs created, which is about 80,000 a month on average instead of 300,000 a month on average in the other survey.
That's a very large difference.
And for the year it's 80 to 120,000, but there's a big negative for January. So the point is, which one are you going to believe?
Mhm.
They're different surveys, they have different methodologies, a different database that they're looking at. One big business, one smaller business, right? But the media cherry picks. That's one of the main points I try to make. It cherry picks the best number,
Mhm.
and it throws out that number, uh, that 353,000. That's what you get, in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and on the media and so forth. They don't mention the other one,
Mhm.
'cause the news isn't that great. And most of the jobs created are part time to the extent they are. Uh, pick your poison, I guess is the point. Either 3.1 million, 353,000, or 820,000, and a negative uh, decline in jobs last month. The same thing you can say about the unemployment rate, right? The unemployment rate is determined by the second survey, CPS. Uh, but you can look at unemployment among full time workers. There's about 120 million full time workers in this country. We have a total labor force of about 167 million. So about 46, 47 million are part time, temp, uh, independent contractors. You know, they say they're in business, but they don't hire anybody. They're sort of self employed, unincorporated, right? If you look at all the other workers, you know, those who dropped out of the labor force, those who haven't looked for a job in the last 4 weeks, you see that figure 3.7
Yeah.
is full time, and you have to have looked for a job in the last 4 weeks. If you didn't look for 5 weeks, well, then you're not counted. And if you haven't looked for a while, you're not counted. And if you drop out, you're definitely not counted. So you look at another table in the CPS. One table at A1 will tell you it's 3.7% unemployment. That's the one with the assumptions I just gave you.
Mhm.
The other one, which is a broader, you know, everybody, not just full time looking last 4 weeks, uh, you get 8% unemployment, 3% versus 8%. I mean, it's all there in the government statistics. It's not as if they're lying. It's all there. But which one you're going to cherry pick? You see, and the media cherry picks the one that makes their friends in government look good. So I keep pointing that out. There are other problems, you know, even with the 353,000. Here's just one problem with it.
Mhm.
Um, as I said earlier, those large corporations send that information to of jobs to the company. I mean, to the labor department, right? They send the information in. The labor department gathers. Now that's raw data. That's, you know, the big companies say, well, we hired this many people. Here's, you know, our figures. Uh, but then what the labor department does is that it goes to a totally separate source that's called new business formations. New businesses start up hundreds of thousands every month. Hundreds of thousands go out of business every month. It's a big economy. The government goes and looks at that new business formation, makes an assumption of how many people are typically hired when a new business is formed,
Mhm.
and it's a plug-in number. That assumption, they, you know, continue it for years, and then they say, well, you know, how many businesses failed, you know, and how many were in them when they failed. Well, there's data for how many businesses started a new business. You know, when you start a business, you got to file with your Secretary of State in your state, right? But when you go out of business, you just go away. You know, no one files, oh, I went out of business, right? So they have no idea how many businesses actually failed. It's a historical assumption, historical average, nor the number of workers in it. So what they're doing is they're saying, oh, net business formation, when they don't have information for those businesses that went out of business, just those that started. They plug in a number, and then they take that information, that database, and they add it to the database of the big companies reporting, and they merge those two databases, and then they do statistical operations on it, seasonality, and so forth. And that's the number they come up with. That's the 353,000. Now, the problem with that new business formation database is that the information they're taking is 6 to 9 months before. It's lagged 6 to 9 months. So they're taking a whole bunch of data 6 months ago and adding it to the data the big companies send them, and they're merging them and doing manipulations on them. And it comes out 353,000. Now, I think there's a problem with that, you know, but that's how it's done. And there's a lot of manipulations like that going on in the numbers for jobs, for inflation as well, for wages and so forth, that average person isn't aware of. Uh, I mean, you know, it's not exciting bedside reading.